Hey guys, I'm Jim Fiscus with Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Moulton, Alabama, and I dig VBS. Now I know if you're watching this video, chances are you probably dig VBS just like I do. And today I want to talk with you about what it will take to get our entire churches to dig VBS like we do. The theme verse for this year's Lifeway VBS is Jeremiah 29:13. It says, "And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart." The theme for Lifeway's VBS is Destination Dig, and it deals with the archaeology of modern day Israel and how they are literally digging deeper to discover the truths of God's Word. If we're going to get people to dig VBS like we do, our churches to dig VBS like we do, then we're going to have to answer a simple question: why? We're going to have to discover why we have VBS. This past year with COVID-19 and all that has gone on, we saw VBS take a lot of different shapes and forms, and many of us in our churches answered that question, why VBS? When it was brought to our attention, should we do it this way or that way? Should we have an in-person VBS, even though it's not going to be as big and we're going to have to take a lot of safety measures and all those things, or should we do it virtually and all of that, and take the time to put all the things together for VBS to send out to the homes? And so when we looked at all that, when it was going into VBS this last year, we had to answer the question in ourselves, why? Why are we doing this? Are we doing VBS because it's just a tradition? I mean, we've always done VBS. Jesus did VBS, didn't he? I mean, VBS has always been around. It's a tradition in our churches. And I know a lot of our churches are tradition rich. Some people try to fight tradition. Some people, they won't move away from tradition. But is VBS just simply a tradition in our churches? Is it just something that we did as children and young people, and we want to pass that on to our children and young people? Why do we do VBS? Now, I think many people answered the why as simply, it's the largest evangelistic tool most churches have. That is the why. The why of VBS is reaching children for the Lord. Several years ago, I was a young preacher and I was called to pastor a small church, my very first church, and it was out in the county, in Colbert County. And the first Sunday I was there was 27 people there. 7 of them was my family, my wife and I and our 5 children. There was only 1 other child in the church, so a total of 6 children in the church. But not long after that, my wife had talked to me about wanting to do VBS that summer. And I had the natural question, why? I mean, it's just our kids, but I didn't really say that to her. And I was young and dumb enough just to support her. And, well, maybe that was smart, because it's always good to support your wife. But I said, let's do it. She talked to several of the ladies in the church. We talked to the church about it. And she got help from a lot of different people there in the church. But as they were helping her put this VBS together, their thoughts that they would later tell us, they wouldn't tell us then, but later they told us that they were thinking, if she wants to have VBS, why doesn't she just do it at home? It's just her kids. But they were very supportive. They helped do the decorations. They helped do all of that. And so as we were leading up to this first VBS, my wife had prepared for 24 children. And the reason for that is simple. Things came in packs of 12. And so 2 packs of 12 was 24. Reminds you, that would be 4 times the number of kids that we had at church at that time. And so as she prepared for 24 and she was getting ready for VBS, and VBS come around. And on that first day of VBS, we had 42 children show up. Now, we were a small church out in the middle of nowhere, but God had sent us 42 children. That might not sound like a lot to you, but we only had 6 normally. And out in the middle of nowhere, without running a van, without running a bus, God sent us 42 kids. That week, we had an average of around 49 kids each day. We saw a lot of great things come from that. We started our children's ministry at the church, our Wednesday night children's ministry, our Sunday morning, Sunday evening children's ministry. We began a children's choir that we would travel all over Northwest Alabama singing in revival services and different things. We began our children's ministry, and before long, our church bought a church van. And then we had another one donated to us. And so within 6 months, we were running 2 church vans every service, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. God really blessed through that initial VBS to actually grow that church. And how he did it was those children would come, and then they would get saved, and their parents would see that, and their parents would start to come. And before long, the church that was running 27 on the first Sunday I went there was now running about 150. God really blessed. And it goes back to that very first VBS. It wasn't just about growing that church, but it was about those children. And those children later came to know Christ. I got to baptize almost all of them. It was a tremendous miracle that God did in that little country church out in the middle of nowhere. On my wall in my office right now is a picture of several of those children on the day they got saved, standing on stage with myself and the pastor at the church where we were visiting at the time. That's the why. The why is reaching those children. And if that is the why, and if the why is that important, it's going to take the entire church to get behind it. It's going to take the entire church to do VBS. If we continue to let VBS be a tradition, if we continue to do VBS just like we've always done it and look at it like we've always done it, then it's always just going to be what we've always done. And eventually it's going to decline. We're going to see fewer and fewer people. In fact, we're seeing fewer and fewer kids right now. But the why of VBS is those children need Christ, and we need to show them Christ. This past year with COVID, we learned a lot. One of the things that burdened my heart so much in the fall was, are we going to lose this generation because we're not able to reach them like we used to? And I began praying towards that and had several other pastor friends pray towards that. Are we going to lose this generation? We cannot lose this generation. We cannot lose this generation. So VBS is important. It's vitally important for our churches. It's vitally important for our children. But how do we do it? If we discover why, we're going to also have to discover how. How are we going to do it, and how are we going to involve our entire church, our whole church, in VBS? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I'm sure that you know of ways to include different people in your church. But how many of us has ever been to that VBS clinic and that one person shows up and they talk about, man, I've already got all the volunteers I need. Everything's going along great. Everything's going well, man. Everything is super. I don't need any more help. We're just sitting on G, waiting on O. Cannot wait to get VBS started. I don't know. Maybe you've run across that person. I don't know. But it does seem like all of us need more help with VBS. So how? How are we going to get that help? How are we going to discover that help? We're going to have to reach every part of our church. We're going to have to reach the more experienced people in our church. We're going to have to reach out to our students. We're going to have to reach out to our school teachers who, man, they've been teaching all year. They don't want to teach anymore in the summer, but we're going to have to reach out to them. We're going to have to reach out to our bus drivers. We're going to have to reach out to our entire church. And I believe first and foremost, that's going to have to start at the top. It's going to have to start out with our pastors. Our pastors need to have a burden for VBS. They need to realize the why. They need to realize the burden for VBS and get a passion for it. It's not just for children's pastors. It's not just for children's directors. It's not just for VBS directors. But our pastors need to have a passion for VBS. Every year at our church, I teach the missions class. I love the missions class, and I teach that. And our children get to see a pastor at our church in the classroom teaching VBS. We need our pastors on board. And so if you're a VBS director or whoever you might be, go to your pastor, talk to them about the importance of VBS. Now, some things I have done in the past at churches where I pastored was I have done every end of January, 1st of February, on a Sunday night, I would do what I would call a VBS vision cast. And during that service, the entire service was related to VBS. We would play some of the songs. We would, my daughter does the moves and motions, and she teaches that, and she would do that on stage and would help get the congregation involved. And we're talking about our adults, a Sunday night crowd. And we would do, like I said, do some of the songs. We would do some of the games. We would make it as if it was like the opening of VBS at one of the previews. And so we would include some folks. We would do different things and have some activities and stuff. And then I would, of course, during that time, I would introduce the theme, whether it was Agency D3 or Journey Off the Map or whatever it was. And I would introduce that, and then I would preach for a moment, not long, but I would give a devotion. Congregations like to hear it when the pastor's going to give a devotion instead of a message. And all it is just a word. I mean, you can preach a devotion or a message, but nevertheless, I would give a devotion of the theme verse and what that week was about. And I would even walk through the steps of that week. And what it would do would, early on in the winter, it would invoke in our people a passion for what was going to be taking place in the summer. And so I think it's important. I love the early bird clinics our associations do. I've gotten to participate in some of those. I love the VBS clinics that our associations do for your association. I love that, and vitally important. But I think it's important that we get into our own churches and we introduce this theme. And what that does is that lets our people know that we as pastors are passionate about VBS, and we are going to do whatever it takes to reach this generation of kids through VBS. And so I think one way to reach our whole church is to have a vision cast day. Do it early. Don't wait till around VBS time, but do it now. Have a vision cast night. Let VBS be your whole service. Something else we've done is we have involved our adults and our students in VBS by teaching them the VBS curriculum weeks leading up to VBS. So with our students, we've done D-Nows and we've taught it on our Wednesday night Bible study time, on our Sunday night Bible study time. We've used this curriculum to teach them prior to VBS ever starting. For most VBSs in our state, if we didn't have the students to help with VBS, we couldn't do VBS. Most of us don't do student VBS because we need our students for our children. But I want to encourage you this when you're dealing with your students. Involving them in VBS is not just getting them to help with rec. It's not just getting your students to take your kids from one place to the next. Don't just get your students to simply be helpers. Challenge them to be the leaders. Challenge them to be the teachers. Now, have an adult with them have an adult there to help them, maybe even to help them prepare and to get them ready and really to train them to be these teachers. So have someone experienced there with them. But let them do the teaching. Let them do the leading. Let them be that. You see, we talk about that next generation is a generation today. Whether they're going to be the next generation or the generation of the day, we've got to let them lead. We've got to let them prepare. And so I challenge you in dealing with your students. Teach them this curriculum ahead of time, like I said, through a D-Now weekend, through your Wednesday night Bible study, through your Sunday night Bible study, Sunday school, whatever. Use these 5 weeks or 5 lessons to teach your students. And not only is it going to put some great truths in them, it's going to prepare them to teach this curriculum to your kids this summer. So I believe that's vitally important. Encourage your students, rather, to be leaders. Now, what that does to your kids is your kids in your church, they look up to your students in your church. You see, because it's your students that are running the football on Friday night or cheering on the sidelines on Friday night. It's your students that are doing the things in school and in the community that your children are looking up to. They admire them. They might love you, and I'm sure they do. And I'm glad that the kids in our church love me. I'm glad about that. But they really look up to those students. Now, you can tell them about Jesus a million times, and they'll listen, and some of them are going to get saved. But you let that football star teach them about Jesus. You know why Tim Tebow has been so successful leading people to Christ? Because they look up to him away from God's word. They look up to him as an athlete, as a person. And if that athlete, if that person, if that one that they look up to tells them about Jesus, that means more than anything. So let your students be leaders and teachers in VBS. Then also, your adults. A lot of times we take a small group to previews or clinics or whatever, and we just simply train them that way. We give them a book. We tell them to go study it. And then we get all of our volunteers together. We get folks that are going to work in the kitchen, folks that's going to work on the parking lot, folks that's going to do this or do that. And we just get them together and say, hey man, VBS starts here. We're going to come and do this, come and share with that. And we just do it. But we fail to actually prepare those helpers for real VBS. I personally believe that every person that works in the kitchen ought to know what VBS is about that year. They ought to know the stories. They ought to know what those kids have learned that day. If they've learned about the resurrection, if they've learned about the birth of Christ that day, those ladies or those men in the kitchen ought to be able to, as those kids are coming through the snack line, they ought to be able to say, hey, did you learn about Jesus being born today? They ought to know about VBS. So to do that, you've got to train them. There's a lot of different ways to train them, and the way that I like the best is have an adult VBS on Sunday night. And we do that. And so on Sunday night, we'll come into some of the VBS songs, and then we'll actually take some of the songs that are more contemporary, more modern worship songs. There's a list with the student VBS curriculum that gives you a list of those songs. And we'll take those and incorporate those into our worship as well to really, we don't want to make it too kiddish because we're dealing with adults, but we do want it to deal with the theme. And then we will preach on that week's theme. And it might not be just exactly what the curriculum says, but we will preach on those scriptures and on that story, and we will relate that in the form of a message. And for 5 weeks on Sunday night, we preach through the VBS material, and we have a great time of worship and invitation and all of those things, so that by the time VBS is here, everyone, the person helping people park in the parking lot, the people driving the vans, everyone knows what VBS is about this year. And then we need to actually recruit. How do we get our entire church to dig VBS? Well, sometimes we have to kind of look at who we have and who we can get, and we have to incorporate some roles to get those people to actually be able to help. For example, church where I used to pastor, we had a principal of one of our local schools. He had actually retired, but he was still a young guy in his early 50s, mid 50s, but he had retired from teaching. He was a principal. A very great guy, a super good guy, very relatable to people, and I knew that I wanted to involve him in VBS some way. And so we began looking at ways to involve him, and I talked with him. He said, man, I have never done anything with VBS. I've never taught. I've never even been to VBS as an adult. I said, well, brother, that's going to change this year, and this is what I need you to do. And I asked him to do two things. I asked him to be on the evangelism team, which was literally the team that would help get the children out of the cars, introduce himself to the parents. He would be that contact between the parents and the church. He would be on the team of contacts. And so he would be there to get the kids, take them inside. He would also be there to get the kids afterwards to take them back to their cars. And so he was that person of contact. After everything was said and done, he would also be that person for follow-up for those people, because they're the ones that saw him at VBS. And so he would be that follow-up, or at least he would help lead the team of follow-up. And so we had 4 or 5 people that were in that evangelism team. And throughout the week, if any of our children needed to talk to someone and we couldn't do it in a class format, that evangelism team would be there, and they would come and they would share the gospel with our children. But something else we asked him to do was we asked him to be our VBS administrator. Now, my wife was the VBS leader, but he was going to be the VBS administrator. And what that meant, because of his years of experience in school, leading a school, he was going to help lead the administrative part of it, taking care of he was going to help with the counting and help with all of those things. And on Monday night of this particular VBS, he had said he would do all that. On Monday night of this particular VBS, we had some storms coming in. I was teaching missions, as I mentioned earlier, and so I really didn't know what was going on with the weather. I wasn't checking my phone. I didn't know. My wife was the leader, and she was checking her phone, and she went to him and talked to him about it, and he actually set up the plan as to how we would handle the storms. And so he put that into action because he knew how to do that at school. What I didn't know was we became under a tornado watch. And so I was teaching class. He knocked on my door. He handed me a slip of paper. He told me on the slip of paper, it just simply said, VBS is closing at this particular time. Have your students to the sanctuary. It was just a simple little note. And I trusted him that he knew what he was doing. I didn't know what really was going on, but we did. We stopped VBS early that night. We had called the parents. He took care of all of that, getting all that done rather. Called all the parents, got them there to pick up their children, got them home. On my way home, tornadoes came through right after I got through a particular area, had come through and did some damage. In hindsight, looking back, had we not had that administrator there who knew the seriousness of it and had not dismissed VBS when we did, those tornadoes came through at the very time that we would have normally been dismissing VBS. That VBS administrator, a role that we created so that someone could specifically have a job. That role saved lives. And so when you're looking at your church, I want you to find people and create roles for them. Maybe it's a VBS administrator. Maybe it's someone bringing the kids from the cars to the door. Maybe it's someone just going around making sure that the teachers have water or whatever it is. Invent roles and then go get people, say, hey, I've got this role for you. And get them to do it. Another way to include your entire church is we all have our experienced people in our church are folks that are, they might not be able to teach anymore. They say they've done their part, they've served their roles, whatever, but no one's ever done their part and served their roles. They should always be involved. Maybe we can get them just to pray, to commit to praying. If they can come to the church before anybody else gets there and just simply go in the classrooms and pray for that teacher, pray for those students, cover the entire building. Maybe you can get people to do a prayer walk around your building every day. Look for ways to invent roles that you need filled. That way, when that person says, I can't teach, you say, well, that's good because I've got something else I need you to do. And that person says, hey, I can't do rec. I don't need you to do rec. I've got people to take care of rec, but I need you to be an administrator. I need you to pray. I need you to be a helper. Look for ways, creative ways, to make creative roles to involve everyone. If VBS is going to be a success, it's going to take everybody. It's not just a few teachers. It's not just the pastor. It's going to take everyone. I firmly believe that you ought to go to the different groups in your church. You ought to go to the different Sunday school classes right now and say, hey, we've got VBS coming up on these dates. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I think it's imperative that the pastors go before the deacons and say, guys, hey, we need you. We need you to be active and involved in VBS. Share with them the passion of VBS. Maybe you're a VBS director and you'll go to your pastor and say, Pastor, can I address the deacons at the next deacons meeting and let them know how important this is? In order to get your church to dig VBS, you have got to share with them your passion for VBS. And in order to share your passion, you must be passionate. I believe there are 3 keys to having a successful VBS in your church. First of all, you've got to be passionate. Second of all, you've got to be prepared. You can't just wait and just expect VBS to take care of itself. You've got to prepare now. And then the third thing is present. You've got to present VBS. And so when you're talking to the deacons, you're talking to your senior adult ministry, or you're talking to your student ministry, or whoever it is you are presenting to, your women's ministry, your men's ministry, whoever it is you're presenting to them, let them know you're passionate. Be prepared to tell them about VBS and about what VBS means to your church and about what VBS means to the kingdom of God. Be prepared to do that. Don't just think it's going to happen. Be prepared. And then present it in a passionate way. I'm praying for your church. I hope that you have a great, successful VBS this year. This generation needs it. This generation deserves it. We need to do all we can to make sure that they have the gospel presented to them this year. Again, my name is Jim Fiscus. You're welcome to email me at jfiscus@pgbcmoulton.com, and I will be glad to help you out in your VBS however you need me to, help you recruit, whatever you need. But I'll be praying for you, and let's have a great VBS this year. Man, I dig VBS.